A couple of years ago, I was at home and there was a knock on the door. It was some local guy running for office, canvassing in my neighborhood. I knew immediately he wouldn't mesh with my family, based on their views. So I stepped out on the porch to talk to him. And as the conversation went on, it went from being a typical front door visit to a teaching moment for me about something I always knew was important, yet never took the time to find out more about: politics. I walked with him for at least an hour, and I went from being someone who sat idly by to someone who discovered a positive way to give back to my community. Now hey, I'm a guy from a small backwater town in southern West Virginia, and I feel like I am making a difference. It only makes me imagine what we could do together.
To me, lobbying is an effective way to create change. I'm an environmental lobbyist and I advocate for policies that help protect the people and resources of West Virginia. From an early age, I understood the importance of protecting and preserving West Virginia's natural beauty. Using my voice to make a difference about something I care about helps me feel fulfilled.
I was lucky enough to have parents that encouraged me to stand up for others. I grew up with my mother taking me to marches and protests around West Virginia, and sometimes we would jump in the car and go to DC. I remember us going to the women's marches and the March for Our Lives, just to name a few. And every time I went, I would leave empowered and charged to continue advocating for those who needed a voice. It felt good to be surrounded by people who wanted to make change, and gives you hope that change is possible.
In the past, I was familiar with the ACLU, but I never had any interest in being directly involved. I thought they had it covered. In my early 20s, I moved out of the state for a few years. And when I moved back, I was working on a project where the ACLU was involved. And eventually, I found myself on weekly calls with them. After about 9 months, they invited me to join the board, and I was so honored. I never saw myself on any board, let alone the ACLU. To me, the ACLU is about inclusivity, freedom, safety, and fairness. They're a voice for the voiceless, and that's something that's important to me, and it's been my goal since childhood.
The best music has a good rhythm and a strong beat. But you want a beat you can depend on, right? Well, that's how the Earth works too. For at least the past 1 million years, our planet has gone through warm periods and cold periods on 100,000 year cycles. You could say these natural cycles of warming and cooling are fundamental to Earth's rhythm. But in just the last 200 years, we've experienced something offbeat. A period of warming more rapid than ever before. And you know what? 99% of scientists agree. Human activity is the main driver of this global warming.
Since I was a kid growing up in West Virginia, I have always been outside, from Pipestem State Park to Brush Creek State Falls. My friends and family have always loved spending time in our local parks. Growing up, I never fully understood the amount of knowledge that was surrounding us. Trees, for instance, they provide so much information in their core, relaying natural events such as flooding, fires, or drought. And this is important because the environment affects how we make decisions and implement change. Humans and nature have a dependent relationship on one another. I feel that since the industrial age, our economy has increased at such a phenomenal level while leaving out consideration for our environment. This scares me, and it should scare you too.
You may ask why I got involved in politics. I'll tell you why. When I was younger, I saw people struggling in our state, whether it was students in the classroom, families in my community, or people who retired yet couldn't afford the bare essentials to live. I felt that in some way, if I got out there myself, then maybe just maybe, I could truly make a change. Are you doing anything to make a change in your community? If not, let me challenge you. This world is incredibly messed up, and the way I see it, you're either part of the problem or you could very well be part of the solution. It's up to you.
Almost everything we care about is affected by politics, especially local politics. I care about the future of my state and my community, so I decided to run for office. I may or may not win, but I'm at least willing to try because I care about my community.
During my time at Concord University, graduating with a Geography and Geospatial Sciences degree, I created a research project testing water quality in different areas. I hypothesized that watersheds such as creeks, ponds, and even puddles by industrial areas such as restaurants and parking lots would somehow be cleaner than rural areas surrounded by farmlands and occasional dumping grounds. My findings weren't all as I had expected. Some industrial areas were dirtier than rural watersheds, but the findings did vary. This makes you question, what are the infrastructure and water management tools in place for runoff water or rain washing pollutants downstream? What do you think?
Breathe in. Breathe out. Just now, you made carbon dioxide. Have you heard of it? Carbon dioxide, or CO2, is a chemical compound formed when one carbon atom bonds with two oxygen atoms. It's usually a gas. Every time you breathe in air, oxygen in that air moves to your blood. During this, CO2 moves from your blood to your lungs, and you breathe it out. This process is an example of how CO2 is added into our atmosphere naturally. But there are other ways to produce it to a much, much larger scale. Human activities like burning coal and oil and gas. Since pre-industrial times, CO2 has increased by 50% in the atmosphere. And in the United States, over 90% of human-caused CO2 emissions are from the burning of fossil fuels.
I grew up in Charlestown in the Eastern Panhandle. I moved to the capital when I realized this is where the action is happening. I love being able to walk around and see senators, delegates, council members, and even my favorite coffee shop owners. They're not just names on paper or faces on TV. They're the people who are making policy for West Virginia, and that's pretty cool.
I am 24 years old and I am running for a seat on the Kanawha County Board of Education. Because I want to make a difference.
Ten years ago, the Elk River in Charleston, West Virginia had a huge water crisis. Chemical storage tanks leaked hazardous chemicals into the river, spoiling clean water for Charleston and all areas downstream. So as a result, there is a huge amount of distrust in our water systems. I have a ton of friends that never drink from their taps, continuously purchasing cases of water because they just don't want to drink from the tap. But buying cases and cases of water does not solve our problem. There is recent research that shows there is a significant amount of microplastics found in one single use of bottle of water, and that is a big problem for our bodies. Our bodies are not made for consuming plastics.
I had a plan. I was never one to sit around and watch TV all day. I've always had a plan. My family and friends have always called me a go-getter, or at least as far back as I can remember. When I was young, I wanted to be a doctor, just so I could travel to help people that couldn't help themselves. When I was 15, I started my own landscaping business. I have a dual degree in college. I volunteer at the local hospital and Humane Society. And after all that, I still have a plan. People have always told me to slow down, and they've always joked that I would die if I didn't. I don't care. Long term, I may not be 100% sure what kind of work or career I'll do, but I know this, I will have an impact on whatever I choose to do. And hey, guess what? I still have a plan.
A few years ago, I lobbied on Capitol Hill, working on the case Juliana versus United States. This case involved 21 youth plaintiffs suing the federal government for a right to a stable climate. The export and production of fossil fuels is fueling the climate crisis, and we deserve protection under the law for a right to a stable climate.
My biggest passion is protecting the environment. We need clean air and we need clean water. It's that simple. And too many folks here in West Virginia don't have that. When we hear about climate change, it can sound like it's happening so far away. Fires in California or the ice melting in Antarctica. But it's happening here too. And we can do our part at the local level to try and make our homes a better place. And that's why I work on local sustainability issues in my volunteer time.
There are many success stories across our shelters at YWCA Charleston, and each one gives us courage and hope to not only our clients, but our staff as well. From regaining custody of their children to owning an apartment after experiencing homelessness, or regaining confidence and power after experiencing domestic violence. The stories are endless. I feel lucky to be able to work towards our mission of eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all.
If Earth is experiencing warming, then what's the big deal? What is the impact? Well, I'll tell you. The more heat that is trapped in our atmosphere means the more that our climate is altered. We are talking about long-term changes to weather patterns. Climate change expresses itself by water. This could mean too much water or not enough of it, causing weather and climate disasters like severe floods and droughts. There have been well over 300 of them in the United States since 1980. 50 years ago, you didn't hear about extreme weather happening this frequently. But now, it's happening monthly. Just ask your grandparents. We have seen more and more of these disasters in the past 4 decades, and it will only continue as climate change worsens.
I don't have a family right now, but someday I will, and I worry about what the world might look like for my kids. It seems like we face more problems than ever before. Massive inequality, political chaos, our weather patterns are creating natural disasters on a regular basis, and I feel like we can't even trust our neighbors anymore. But I work to make things better because I want my kids to grow up in a better place. And I believe it's better to at least try to make the world a better place than to do nothing.
I'm the West Virginia organizer for Moms Clean Air Force, and I work to protect children from climate change and air pollution. Children are far more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and I believe that all children have the right and deserve to breathe clean air.
Because of my own personal experience, I felt called to work at YWCA Charleston, which serves those who have endured domestic violence, homelessness, and racial inequality. I was fortunate to have friends and family who supported me, but not everyone has a support system that they can lean on. That's why the work is so important.
Being a West Virginian, I have seen struggles and hardships. And the one thing that gives me hope is how people here in my home state come together. It is our state pride that we work together with our neighbors and even travelers that we don't know in ways that are kind, thoughtful, and passionate. These are the values that make me a proud West Virginian. This connection and pride is what has inspired me to want to give back to our home state and to those who have done the same for me. I'd like to ask you, how are you helping?
Appalachia is no stranger to flooding. We've seen a lot of it, and it has devastated homes and businesses across the region. As our planet warms and climate changes, we can expect more severe floods and weather events like ice storms, tornadoes, heat waves, and drought. In West Virginia, over the next 30 years, it's projected that 1 in 4 properties are at high risk of flooding, and more than 1 in 10 properties will probably flood as well too. West Virginia and Kentucky are 2 of 4 states that face the highest concentrated community flood risk in the entire country.
What is an op-ed? It's a letter to your local paper. It's a chance to tell folks publicly how strongly you feel about something happening in your community. And I do this a lot because it could be a shot in the dark, but it could also change the heart or mind of folks who may or may not agree with me. And when you start, you might not know which it will be, but why not try? It's always worth it.
When I was younger, I struggled with learning to read, and eventually I was diagnosed with dyslexia. I was fortunate enough to get help from the Appalachian Reading Center, which specializes in teaching people with dyslexia how to read. This past fall I got trained and now have 2 students of my own that I tutor twice a week.
That was good. I ran the speech and debate team and National Honor Society while in high school. I ran my own lawn care and maintenance business. I volunteer at the local hospital. I also volunteer at the local Humane Society. I've been involved with several local political elections. When I started college, I had 5 part-time jobs. What are you doing?
Art is an outlet for social change. I'm a singer-songwriter, and I wrote a song called We Are One because I believe it's important to remember that we are all far more alike than we are different. And when we are united in love, we can create a positive change.